Awesome.
Morning, everyone.
How's everybody today?
Good.
Thank you all for joining us. Just a few things before we get started on the agenda. All of you should have received the agenda through an email. Hopefully that's working out. I think the link that I had sent you probably prior to the first meeting is actually the link that we'll use for all of these meetings. That should remain consistent. And but of course, just let me know if you ever need, if you don't get the agenda or you need the link to the meeting. I'll always include that link in the agenda. So before we begin, just an announcement about us holding the meeting virtually. So due to the Safer at Home order issued by Governor Cooper, members of the Bicycle Pedestrian Active Mobility Advisory Committee are participating virtually. All members will vote by roll call. A member will be recognized, and at which time the member will state his or her vote. So we will continue to do our virtual meetings for the time being. And one thing maybe is a good idea is, unless you're speaking, maybe keep your audio or your microphone on mute, just to eliminate any of the background noise. So just let's do the roll call, actually. I think I see who's here, but see Keith Davis here.
Here.
Greg Garrett. Gotcha. John Gunkel. All right. Michael Hosey. Michael. Donna Jones. Let's see Donna. Okay. Scott Miller. Don't see Scott yet. Sharon. See you. AJ. Gotcha. Joshua. All right. And Cynthia. So I don't see Cynthia yet either. There's. Good morning, Dexter.
Good morning.
Dexter is our Transit Authority liaison. So Dexter, thank you for joining us this morning. So before we get into the agenda, just one reminder for everybody. I had emailed everybody about the City of Winston-Salem's Diversity and Harassment Prevention Training program. So there's a video that we all need to watch, and then a sheet essentially certifying that you've watched that video training and that you're aware of the requirements. So just a reminder to get that into me as soon as you can. It is a requirement for serving on the boards and commissions. And I'll send out a message after the meeting with that information again and a reminder. So, but please do take care of that, hopefully before the next meeting. With that, I can turn it over to Sharon. Sharon, if you want to take it away from here.
Thanks, Matthew. Good morning, everyone. Just very quickly, I hope you all had time to review the minutes from the last meeting. Were there any questions about anything on the minutes? Any corrections from the minutes or anything that we left out? No? Okay. And Matthew, do we need to vote those?
Yeah, so if somebody would make a motion to approve those in a second, and then we can do a quick vote on that.
I'll make a motion to approve.
All right.
Thanks, John.
I'll second.
Okay.
Michael, second. All right, so then we'll do the roster vote here again. So Keith, yes or no?
Approve. Yes.
All right. Greg? Greg? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, all right. All right. John approved. Michael approved.
Yes.
Donna? I'm sorry, Donna. One more time.
Approved.
Okay, thank you. Scott is not here. Sharon?
Yes.
AJ? AJ, can you hear me? Oh, AJ, is your audio working?
Oh, I lost him.
I think we lost AJ. We'll come back. And Joshua. Joshua, can you hear me? No audio for Joshua either. Oh. All right. Thank you, Joshua. I cannot hear you. Okay.
Okay, I'll make a note to come back to that
Right.
in a few. Okay. Let's see, we lost Joshua. Okay. So as this is a brand new committee, and I think Greg has a lot of experience with the city, but I'm not sure that anyone else has been on a commission before. So one of the things we wanted to do was just have a really solid understanding of where we fit in the structure. So when recommendations are made and as approvals start happening or decisions are made, we want to know where we fit. So Matthew's going to give an overview of that for us to get us started today.
All right. Thank you, Sharon.
Sure.
So yeah, today I think, the first meeting, we spent a lot of time just introductions and some of that administrative work. And I think in talking with Sharon and Keith about the committee, I think one of the ideas was just to use some time at the beginning to figure out what everybody's goals are for the committee and use that to prioritize kind of the activities that you all will undertake. And for me, one of those goals was to make this group really knowledgeable about the environment in which we work, the processes and the different agencies that are involved and how the funding is managed. And so, over the course of time, as we continue to meet, I'd like to take some time, maybe at each meeting or on a regular basis, to provide that kind of context. It's maybe not necessarily the most interesting thing. It's not getting your hands dirty, really, but it's really important, I think, for all of you to understand that context and the planning work that goes into this and the funding and how all of that leads to improvements in the infrastructure and policies and programs. So I wanted to take a little bit of time. I'll try to be fairly brief with this today, but maybe take 10 minutes or so to discuss some of those context issues, and then leave most of the time open to the discussion for all of you to share with each other what your goals are. But I'll just take a little bit of time here. I'm covering a lot of material, so don't worry if some of it does not make sense at this point. We'll have to revisit some of these. This is what I'm presenting here. We could probably take several days going into detail about. So this is really just an overview to give you some context of how this committee fits in and some of the work that goes on related to transportation planning and funding and implementation. So I'm going to share my screen. I have some slides, not necessarily the most interesting looking slides, but a lot of good information, and I'll try to provide some explanation for each of these. So can all of you see my screen now? Yes. Okay. Yeah. All right. So really wanted to talk about the let's see. There we go. See the full screen now?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, talking about the planning and the context in which we work and the funding. So here, this is an organizational chart of the city, and you can see the citizens of Winston-Salem are up on top there, and the mayor and city council report to them. And you, as the Bicycle Pedestrian Active Mobility Advisory Committee, report to the mayor and city council. So you can see, you fit in, where you fit in there and who you are advising. If you continue down, you can see where, mayor and city council, city manager Lee Garrity's under that. And then there's assistant city manager Damon Duquesne, and Damon spoke at our first meeting back in October. And within his purview then is the transportation department, along with, you can see, utilities and planning and fire and engineering and emergency management. So that's where I am then, is in the transportation department. And just so you all know, my position is split between the city of Winston-Salem and the Metropolitan Planning Organization. So I split my time doing planning work and implementation work for both of those agencies. So I mentioned the Metropolitan Planning Organization, the MPO. You can see the city of Winston-Salem in there in the middle. And the city interacts with, these are three of the primary agencies that we interact with and that probably have the greatest impact on the transportation network and projects and funding that we work with. So you can see the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which I'm a staff person for between the city and the MPO. Then NCDOT is another agency, and then the City County Planning Department and Board. Together, these four agencies probably account for most of the transportation planning and funding work that goes on. Now, there are other agencies. There are nonprofits like the Creative Corridors Coalition and the school system. They deal with transportation issues, but I think for purposes today, we can probably focus on these agencies. So I wanted to go through each of these and just kind of give some background on how they're involved and what their role is in the work that we do. So City County Planning, this is a city department that oversees planning for the city and then obviously the county. So as far as it relates to planning and interaction with bike and pedestrian and active mobility issues, the Legacy Comprehensive Plan is the comprehensive plan for our community, and it looks at all these different issues. So growth management, land use, economic development, health, equity, community character. That's what a comprehensive plan is, to look at all of those issues, and transportation is one of those issues. So we work in coordination with the planning department on these, when it comes to transportation planning, so that what's in the comprehensive plan, the legacy plan, kind of aligns with the plans that we have, and we're working towards the same goals. So there's the comprehensive plan that is kind of the overarching plan for the community. The planning department also oversees the Unified Development Ordinance, and those are regulations guiding essentially the development of the community. And there are a lot of regulations in that ordinance that relate to transportation. So there are parking regulations. So when an area develops, what kind of parking requirements are there for automobile and for bicycle? That's the document that spells out where sidewalks are required. So again, as new streets are built, there's a requirement for sidewalk to be constructed. As developments are built along existing roadways, again, there are requirements for sidewalks to be constructed. So a lot of those kinds of regulations, the infrastructure that we get through development is identified and spelled out through that UDO, the development ordinance. So, while in transportation we're doing our own planning, city county planning is doing kind of the comprehensive planning for the community, and we need to work with them to make sure our work is aligning. So the Metropolitan Planning Organization, the MPO, is another organization with which the city interacts, and there's two-way exchange of plans and funding and information. So the MPO is federally mandated. So for urbanized areas with a population over 50,000, there is an MPO. And the MPO is doing transportation. So it's related specifically to transportation planning for a region. So our region is essentially Forsyth County and a little bit into Stokes, Davie, and Davidson counties. So, but primarily Forsyth County and just kind of reaching into those other counties. It is directed by elected officials from jurisdictions within the MPO. So we have something called the Transportation Advisory Committee, and they're the governing body that makes the decisions on plans and funding. And the members of that committee are mayors and elected officials from the communities within the MPO. So not only Winston-Salem, but Clemens and Louisville and Kernersville and Bermuda Run, all of those communities are represented in the TAC and the MPO. So two of the main functions of the MPO, regional transportation planning, like I mentioned. So within that, there is a comprehensive transportation plan, a metropolitan transportation plan, and then a transportation improvement program, and then several other functions. So we are this MPO is federally mandated to have a transportation plan for our region, so for Forsyth County and a little bit beyond. And we could spend a lot of time going into these things, but what the point I want to get across is there's the the city county planning board, and they have their legacy plan, which is the comprehensive plan for our county. And then we're also federally mandated to have these comprehensive plans that focus on transportation for our MPO area. So again, we have to make sure that the goals are aligning between these plans. Otherwise, we'll have competing interests, and it just won't work out very well. The other role of the MPO is to manage and disperse federal transportation funds. So I mentioned the MPO is federally mandated. As part of that mandate, we receive planning and design and construction funds for projects. So it's the MPO's responsibility to take those federal funds from the US DOT and figure out a method for dispersing them to the local communities. So we have, processes in place, essentially calls for projects where we ask communities to submit projects. We, as the MPO staff, come up with essentially evaluation criteria to rank those project ideas, and then we program funds for those communities to be able to manage their projects. And that's incredibly important for bike and pedestrian projects, because a lot of the projects, greenway projects, some of the larger scale bike and pedestrian projects that we manage and we implement are funds from the MPO. So that's a really important source of funding for the city and all of the other municipalities within the MPO. And so that's a big role. We're programming, approximately $8 to $10 million every other year for transportation projects. And our MPO has made the decision, through the elected officials, that TAC, the Transportation Advisory Committee, to really focus on bike and pedestrian projects. There's a real strong commitment to fund a lot of bike and pedestrian projects. So a majority of the funding historically has gone towards bike and pedestrian projects. So NCDOT is the other major agency that we interact with and that has an impact on our transportation system. So they work on planning, engineering, construction, and funding management. And they are directed by the state legislature and the NCDOT Board of Transportation. So that's a group kind of like our TAC at the MPO level. They make the final decision on recommendations that the staff has regarding policies and funding. So that Board of Transportation is that oversight committee and makes the final call on those decisions. One of the important factors, the relationship we have with NCDOT, is that they control and maintain a lot of roadways in Winston-Salem and Forsyth County. So they have projects going on that we need to coordinate with them in order to make sure they're addressing the issues that we have. And if we want to make changes to roadways in Winston-Salem or Forsyth County and NCDOT maintains them, then we cannot go out and make those changes on our own. We need to coordinate and get approval from NCDOT to make any changes to their roads. But a lot of their roadways are some of the major corridors in the city. So University Parkway and Silas Creek Parkway, Peters Creek Parkway, a lot of those large major corridors that we have that are really important to the community are managed and maintained by NCDOT. So we have a really close relationship with them in working through improvement projects and other issues. And they're responsible for managing transportation projects not only for themselves, but also programming for local communities. So they have, like the MPO, they have transportation funds available. And every so often they, and I'll get into this a little more in the funding, but they issue calls for projects themselves, and they allow MPOs, MPOs to submit projects to them, and NCDOT will then evaluate those projects, and depending on that evaluation works out, they then program funds for projects throughout the state. So they have kind of a parallel process for managing or for programming funding that they receive from the federal government. So then we get to the city, and as it relates to bike and pedestrian work, we have a bicycle master plan, a pedestrian master plan, the Greenway plan, micromobility program, and then local ordinances that essentially direct bike and pedestrian transportation in a way. So we have ordinances related to moving violations and where people can bike and walk and a lot of those things. So that's just another layer of planning. So we have city county planning and their legacy comprehensive plan. Then we have the MPO at another regional level with the comprehensive transportation plan. And then at the city level, we have all of these plans. And at the city level, you can see that bottom note, that's where we really get into, when it relates to bike and pedestrian projects specifically, when we get into the management of the plans, the feasibility studies for projects, the engineering design, and then the construction of those improvement projects. So just the way things are arranged, the city and local municipalities typically manage bike and pedestrian projects. So we need to have good relationships with NCDOT and the MPO and the city county planning department to make sure that the plans that we have lead to the projects that are most in need of being constructed. So just some information about the funding that we have available to us. So there's different sources of those funds. At the local level, we have the annual city budget, the capital improvement program. And then occasionally we have bond funding as well. So if you recall, in 2014 and in 2018, there were bond referendums where residents could actually vote to approve or deny funding for additional projects. So we're very much reliant on those sources for a lot of our projects and programs. At the MPO level, the funding I mentioned, the calls for projects that the MPO conducts, where they allow municipalities to submit projects for consideration for funding. Those are surface transportation funds. So those are federal funds that come through the MPO and are available for bike and pedestrian projects. And then congestion mitigation and air quality program, the CMAQ program. So those are funds that typically go for transit and bike and pedestrian projects with the intention of improving the air quality. And then the final major source is NCDOT. So I mentioned they have a parallel process of evaluating projects from throughout the state and then programming those funds. So their evaluation process is through the Strategic Transportation Investments law. It was a law that was passed by the state government a number of years ago, and it created a process by which NCDOT will evaluate objectively those projects from throughout the state. And then the state uses the Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP, to program those funds. So the TIP is essentially a long table of projects throughout the state that shows how much funding is programmed for each of those projects. So if we would look in the TIP, we could see all of the bike and pedestrian projects that are funded in Winston-Salem with federal and state funds. And then there's also the Safe Routes to School program, and there are federal funds in that essentially through a federal funding source that NCDOT uses for the Safe Routes to School program. And we, Winston-Salem, have a Safe Routes to School grant right now, a $250,000 grant that we're about to begin some work on for programming and education and encouragement efforts. So we have, in all of these categories, we have projects funded in each one of these, through each one of these sources. And there are different requirements for the different sources. And so we manage those processes and see see projects through to construction with these different funding sources. So that, I know that is a lot of information. Let's see. Let me stop sharing here. So it's a lot of information, and we will touch upon these issues again as time goes on and we continue to meet, and we'll kind of get into some more detail. But does anybody have any questions about that? Any kind of overall questions that I can answer right now? I know it's some dense information, and I guess let me know what I can do to help you understand that better. If there are resources that would help, please let me know, because it's important for me, and I think for this group, to understand those processes so we can make the greatest impact possible. So, Sharon, that's all that I have. If nobody has any questions, we can move on.
All right, thanks, Matthew.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. That's it's complicated and very layered. Obviously, we'll probably need reminders going forward. Before I forget, if we could get AJ and Joshua, if you can hear now. AJ, were you able to hear around the minutes?
I think I was until I got called on, probably, but yeah, I approved.
Okay, thank you. And Joshua, can you hear now as well? Not sure if he can or not. Okay. I'll try to circle back. So in listening to that, I guess, and also just as we all get to know one another and what our interests are, this is a really broad scope, and so it would be really easy for us to get overwhelmed or too scattered within this. I think any one of the three topics, whether it's excessive mobility or pedestrian safety or cycling, any one of those could take up a 2-year committee on their own. So just if we could, and I'm going to go through just in the order that the pictures are here, but just to have a little discussion around what your expectations and hopes were in putting an application for this, and in listening to what we've heard so far. And again, it's only our second meeting, but from that, what are your interests or top burning questions right now? And again, I'm just going to go clockwise in the order that I see faces on my screen. So Greg, if you want to start, I think you, of all of us, have the most experience with the city planning and how committees work. But just open discussion on your goals, questions, and thoughts around what our committee's purpose is and what you hope to see from this.
Okay, well, thank you, Sharon, and good morning to everybody on the committee. As Sharon mentioned and Matthew, I think, mentioned earlier, I'm a retired employee of the City of Winston-Salem, Department of Transportation. I was in charge of the transportation planning process for about 23 years, and I was smart enough and fortunate enough to hire Matthew Burchick as my bike and ped coordinator, and I've been bribing him all along to stay with us because he's in high demand, and he's a very valuable employee with the City of Winston-Salem, and I hope we keep him for a long time into the future. I guess I would come from, I guess my interest is that while I am retired, I am still interested in the affairs of the MPO and the progress of projects that I worked on, as well as new projects that have come along by Matthew and the other staff members of the City DOT and the City of Winston-Salem, as well as NCDOT, and just kind of keeping up with that just because I have an interest in transportation. I guess my goals for this is just to stay involved and to try to provide some perspective, I guess, when it comes to any policy issues or technical issues. I see myself as not a mentor. I guess that's too much of a compliment to myself, but to just share a little experience when needed and to help out with all you all and your understanding of the planning process, and maybe a little bit of history of some things that are still currently ongoing. So I'm just glad to serve, and this is not only enlightening for me, but it's also fun for me. It gives me some purpose as a retiree, and I get to stay in contact with the things that I love and do, and particularly working with Matthew. He's a great fellow, and have enjoyed working with him. So I guess that's about it. I'd be happy to answer any questions. So.
That's great, Greg. I actually wrote down that you can keep us reality checked along the way, since you do have that history. One of the things that Keith pointed out is that we may come up with projects that will not happen until long after our terms are over. And if you're not familiar with city planning processes and how funding trickles in, and just that's part of our reality. We can get really excited about something, and then it's going to happen after us. So knowing that along the way, I think, is important too. But thank you. AJ, if you don't mind diving in next.
Yeah, sure. And I think I probably have a lot to learn about the process and more about city planning, and that may kind of hone or change, I think, my perspective some. But I guess the thing that sticks out really is trying to identify opportunities to more comprehensively make the city and the metropolitan area a more walkable and rideable place. I think my perspective as a citizen often is that this planning feels very siloed from other aspects of the city and county government. And I think there are a lot of other departments and areas that could kind of also help these initiatives too. When we put in a bike lane, but then there's construction or limb pickup or whatever that blocks it. I just think there's a lot of opportunities to better coordinate our efforts, whatever those are, in addition to some of the long-term planning that's happening. So I think that's one of the things I'm most interested in, finding out what we can do better there.
I think those are great points, AJ. Thank you. Circling back a little bit, having Matthew present on the topic that he did today, I think there's opportunity maybe for us to have other topics in presentation format at each of our meetings, especially the first few months, because we liaison with our communities and understanding why something feels siloed on the outside versus what the city process, and we can help communicate that back, or finding better ways to communicate those bike lane blockages. I've experienced that as well, where that communication needs to go and how to do that appropriately so it gets attention. All of that can fall to us as well. Those are great points. Thanks.
Yeah, I would just follow up on that, AJ. Those are great ideas, and I think one of my roles is to identify the people within the city and the MPO and beyond that can share some of that information and make you all aware. And like Sharon said, you all can serve as liaisons then for the community on how to report issues and what we can do about them. So, think about that. What are the issues? And then I can help identify the people to come in, and they can speak with us and provide that information and just kind of improve our knowledge base as well. So that will be my role for sure.
Awesome. Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, so for me, I think my kind of goals are, when I'm out and about on the streets. Before I moved to Winston-Salem, I never had, and took on my current position, I never had the perspective of the kind of transportation side and the safety side. I was always out there just kind of operating in my own world. So for me, this is a good opportunity just to kind of make those things more apparent to me when I see something that's like, oh, that's a dangerous intersection. And just for me, just to make things more just kind of visible, just in that in turn helps me be more connected to the streets and to Winston-Salem and kind of see what's going on. I don't know, I'm heavily involved in the biking community, and this for me is just something to kind of just help me see all perspectives, or more perspective than what I'm currently seeing. Transportation side of things is really, it's kind of energized me, and the advocacy side, and really getting folks, especially now, this cycling this year, as we all know, it's just kind of exploded, and it's really important that and just movement. People are moving and out and about. We just need to make sure that people are protected, because a lot of times when it's brand new to people, they don't recognize the inherent danger that they put themselves in when they're out on the streets, enjoying themselves, especially with their families. Just kind of, I'm excited just to be a part of this group and really expand and see how I can contribute. And yeah.
Thank you. Great points as well. It does take, there is an education process to using trails and being safe on them, and whether you're walking or riding, if you haven't been active and you haven't sort of become enculturated to, bike on the left or those kinds of things, there's a process to that as well. And I don't know what the right way is to get word out about that or help people understand it before a crash happens, but I think that's a great goal to have. Sorry, I muted myself. Joshua, are you able to hear and speak at this time?
You hear me now?
You are. Yes. Hi.
Okay. I don't know if I'm visible, but
You are. Yep.
I think, and I apologize, I think we had some Wi-Fi issues at the health department here, but I think the question is, what are my goals and vision for?
Yes, yeah. I'm sorry.
You don't
we were just loosely what each person, what their expectations and goals were in joining the commission. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So just real quick, I think it's to make a more walkable and bikeable community for really just for everybody, from the person that goes to Paul Schwinn and has a $4,000 bike and goes 100 miles like my old roommate from college, or the person that needs to walk or bike to Dollar General and go a quarter of a mile or a half a mile to the middle ground of the family with their two kids, from greenways to sidewalks to major thoroughfares, just making it easier and safer, because I think it benefits the whole community, whether it's, no matter what your viewpoint, if it's for an athlete and fitness, or to save time, to save money, to get to your job. I just want to look at that. I really have been blessed to last 2 years live near the Muddy Creek Greenway, and that is just such a resource. And I'm really passionate about ways to take things like that, and when you can connect them to other things, so you can go there. I mean, a lot of people drive there, get their bike out, or go for a run or walk with their family, but also what are ways to connect that where you can get somewhere else. And I know there are some connections, and Matthew's even sent me some routes, but just connectivity too, I think is vital, so people can use it, whether it's for work or play. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Greg, we've already done you. John, sorry.
Yeah, my goals and expectations, I've been in the transportation planning for most of my life for the private sector, and I can certainly share your comments, Sharon, about the long-term planning, because I was deeply involved in that, and things I worked on didn't come to fruition for a number of years. So I certainly understand that. My expectations are to help, like a lot of what already has been said, is to help influence and learn about, the pedestrian and bicycling in Winston-Salem, to make it a more safer and equitable and efficient use of funding for everybody. So one thing I was thinking in terms of expectations, I mean, is it appropriate for this body to really go after the rail line, somehow pursue that in some way? I know that's been a lofty goal that's been out there for a long time, but I don't know if it's appropriate, to work on that, to help pursue that. So that's primarily my interest and expectations.
I don't know if it's appropriate, John, but I would love for Matthew to answer that question, to see, that's such a huge tourist draw. I'm so jealous of people in Pennsylvania and Maryland where they have these extensive rail trails. And I've just begun exploring some of those. It might be a personal interest more than a committee interest, or a little bit of both, but if that's something in the works.
Yes, I think that's a good topic for us to pursue. Probably what I would recommend is that we identify somebody who can come in, who's an expert on our specific lines, from whether it's Norfolk Southern or somebody who's very familiar with their operations, and have them speak to that, and then we can learn something about what it takes and what the opportunities are, and what options we have in pursuing those kinds of projects. So I think that's just the kind of goal that I was hoping to get today. That kind of specific goal that gives us, that gives me some guidance on what I can do to kind of facilitate that information exchange and get people here who can help us with those issues. So thank you for that, John.
Yeah, if anyone's not familiar, there's a Rails to Trails Conservancy. It's an extensive website and trail maps and that sort of thing, where they've taken old railway lines and turned them into multi-use gravel paths. So if you want to check that out, that's what I think John was referring to. Donna, are you able to hear and speak and share your goals, maybe dreams and expectations for the committee?
It's kind of like what I shared on the first meeting. I enjoy being outdoors, and so just really interested in learning more about the trails and all the plans the city has, and also with the onset of COVID and other things that happened, our community's become more of an outdoor community, and all of that, just understanding how everything works together and being able to maybe influence some decisions so that it makes it a better city for outdoor mobility, especially as new people move into our cities and as those who are in our cities are beginning to take more advantage of outdoor spaces.
Great, thank you, Donna. Keith, do you want to share?
Yeah, I would, a couple of things that I would echo. I think Michael said it earlier, that I kind of came at this from my own little world as a recreational user, biker and runner for fun and for exercise, not necessarily for, commuting per se. I did try to, at one point, dabble in that, and was quickly, those visions were snuffed out just by the practicality of it. I think as I approached this committee, for me, it was more of a, coming from that perspective, how can I figure out how these projects and goals are pulled together and effectuated. And it took me that first call a couple of days ago with Matthew to figure out how things come together, to realize how complex it can be, and then wading into the legacy plan and the plans that are beneath it. It's a very complicated process, and I guess to learn, how and why that is, I would have told you prior to getting involved that I as a citizen and a recreational user, I see pieces and parts getting developed. And if you have some creativity, you can kind of see how that ultimately will accumulate to a whole. Sometimes, though, it's hard to see how that's happening. You have to be a little creative to see the bits and pieces of bike lane, the bits and pieces of greenway, and be patient to know that there is a plan in process. And I would have told you that my goal was to kind of come in and learn the process and see if we can't figure out how to make that more impactful. And I think that still is a goal. But, the more I read some of these plans and saw, some of the goals and the measures of accountability, and, it really is going to involve a change of culture and thought process. I think about my futile attempt to commute on bike to work, and I'm in the running business. So of all people that could be riding a bike to work, I thought it'd be me. But I think it's really just going to involve a culture shift. And Matthew said the word liaison, and perhaps rather than me learning how the city works, a goal of this committee could be to communicate back to the community exactly what is happening. Because I think it is going to involve some cultural shift, and the population embracing these projects and using them. So as much as it could be to advise the projects that are pursued, it could be to help the community embrace what is being done, so that we can get some momentum. So I don't know how eloquent that was, but more and more I see our role as much advising as communicating back, so that I think sometimes, you could apply this to many facets of living in a community. We just need to realize what is being done and embrace it and use it. People feel good about it, and that could create our own momentum.
Thanks, Keith. I think those were great points, and kind of segue into wrapping up this conversation. I was going to ask if there were a topic that folks would like to see presented on the next one. Just listening to the comments just now and Keith's summation, I'm wondering if the safety plan might be a good topic for a next presentation, so that we understand maybe what has been done around educating the general population around bike and pedestrian safety, or what some plans are right now to help mitigate some of the incidences and start that culture shift. That's hard. I mean, it's complicated, and everybody gets information in different ways and participates in different ways, but what has been done and what some of the plans are around educating people on both their own personal safety as they're out and about, but also for those who are operating motor vehicles, how to educate them on safety at intersections or along bike lanes, and what those little symbols on the road actually mean to them as a driver. Or feel free to correct me if there's something else, a burning topic that you feel like we need to delve into before that.
Sharon, I would say, I think that's a good point. And I don't know if you have any other, what your goals were. We certainly want to hear what your goals for the committee are, and maybe we can move on after that, but I would love to.
Sure. Yeah, I echo a lot of what Keith said. I sort of knew this was complicated, but not quite to the level that I understand now after listening to and sitting in on the presentation from the consulting group that we were invited to, and that meeting that we were invited to that followed our first meeting. And I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on the official name of that team, the Pedestrian.
The Walkable Winston-Salem project with
Walkable Winston-Salem. Yeah, and understanding that that was different than a bike committee, and that that things are segmented but yet interconnected. Just that whole complexity and layered approach that you sit in the middle of, Matthew, has been really enlightening for me. I shared in the first meeting that I've been the victim of an accident. I was hit on my bike by a car, and with the blessing of semi-unemployment and stay-home measures, I've really begun exploring our immediate community in ways that I didn't before. I ride almost daily now. And I've also begun, setting some goals and exploring some of these regional rail trails and seeing what other communities are doing differently. There's a survey that came out from the city of High Point last night about their greenway expansion plan, and then also as I travel, I see the differences in what other communities have been able to do versus what we do here. Internationally and across the U.S. So really just kind of putting all of those pieces together and understanding where Winston-Salem is and what our goals are as a community, and then how we can impact those goals. Can we move things forward faster through advocacy? Can we find alternative funding? I've been in the nonprofit world, so I kind of think a little bit that way, but then just strategizing and planning and just, again, seeing where we can support and educate. A little bit of everything that felt scattered, but.
If I could, I wanted to follow up on the one thing that Keith had mentioned, actually, and having this group serve as liaisons. One of the issues that I see is that we have all of these different planning efforts and underway. Whether it's we just went through a comprehensive transportation plan and a metropolitan transportation plan with the MPO. We're obviously working through a pedestrian plan now. We had the bike plan before. People can get burned out. If we just send out an email, for instance, saying there's a public input meeting for this plan coming up, please provide your input. People don't have any context for what that plan is and how it relates with other plans and whether it's actually the best way for them to get involved. So I think one of the things I would love for this group to be able to accomplish is to be that liaison with the public to say, all right, we have this plan coming up. This one is really an important one for you to get involved with. Please do comment, and this is how it fits with the other plans. And then, maybe when some other efforts are out there saying, well, this is how this fits in, it would be great to have your input, but maybe it's not quite as important. For you all to be able to kind of be liaisons with the rest of the public about, what is the best method for getting involved? Where can your voice have the greatest impact? I think that's an important thing, because these plans are long term, and it's hard to get people involved because it's hard to see a direct benefit. So, if people have a limited amount of time to get involved, where's the best place for them to do so? And I think you all can help with that a great deal. Sharon, I know Dexter's on the line as well. Dexter, as it relates to the transit authority and biking and walking, what are your goals?
We're pretty much like Keith was saying. We do a lot of pedestrian and cyclist pickups, so we carry both people. We do pedestrians and we do pickup and cyclists. So if y'all can give us the information of like bad intersections, or I've only been here since February, so just me riding around at some of the bus stops, I can see that they are in some terrible spots. So sometimes just the bus stops themselves are putting pedestrians and cyclists in an unsafe predicament. So like Keith, I want to get from this committee, I could take this information straight back to the drivers. We have safety meetings every month. And so the things that, you know, you have y'all come up with and maybe projects that y'all are going forward with, I can relay that right to the drivers so they can be on the lookout at this intersection, or this project is starting, so we need to be on the lookout for more activities, cyclist activity or pedestrian activities at this location. So this committee will help me out a lot with the safety with the pedestrian and cyclists, as far as, you know, in a correlation with the drivers and the city transit buses and also the Trans-Aid drivers too, because they're not picking up people at bus stops. They're picking up people everywhere, Walmarts, the mall, apartment complexes. So we can make the whole community safe and more aware of pedestrian and cyclists. I feel like it'll be a safer community.
Thanks, Dexter. That's great. Sharon, just so you know, we only have a few minutes left before 10. I don't know if you would like to wrap it up.
Sure. Well, I guess my first question would be if that would be possible, Matthew, for us to have a presentation at the next meeting, and did everyone feel like safety education would be a good next topic?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
I agree. I think that's a great one.
That's certainly possible. That's something I can come up with.
Okay.
Yeah, I can plan on that for the next meeting. And I know Sharon and Keith, one thing we had discussed was, you know, kind of using this input now from committee members to come up with essentially a work program for the group, so that we have kind of a logical way of proceeding through the priorities of this group. And one thing I would say is I think we had some really good feedback today. But one thing I may ask in the future is even, you know, inside of the feedback that we got, what were some of the specific projects, some of the specific measures that you all would like to take? You know, John Gungle with you know, that the idea of communicating with the railroad companies and figuring out what the options are for using rail beds for trails, like that's a very concrete issue that we can pursue. And I would love to get more specific issues like that from the committee. So I would encourage you to continue to think about those kinds of specific issues that you all would like to pursue. And I think, you know, I can work with Sharon and Keith on coming up with a work program for the committee. And we'll just go through that program and try to address all of the interests that you all have. Sharon, Keith, I think I've said enough, but does that sound like a reasonable approach to you?
Yeah, Keith, I was just going to say we could make that our topic for discussion at the next meeting, to come up with a short list of maybe 2 to 3 work group opportunities that we could delve into, or at least begin learning more about and see if they're possible for us. Does that sound good?
That makes perfect sense to me. You know, something that we could all embrace and kind of put our arms around the same thing. It'd be a great plan.
Okay. All right.
Okay, I've got 10 a.m., so we are at adjournment. Thank you all. I really appreciate all of the insight, and I feel like I learned a great deal this morning about all the layers of this. And you. Anything else, Matthew?
Can I ask one quick question, Sharon?
Sure.
Of Matthew. Our involvement, and if we get into policy issues and so forth, are we directly reporting to the Public Works Committee or the Transportation Advisory Committee, or are we kind of just an independent group? How do we fit in on that connection? I guess I saw obviously your diagram earlier, and I completely understand that, but I'm a little bit more curious about do we have a direct linked to a particular agency within the city.
Yeah, so it's you know, as a city commission, y'all would report to city council, and depending on what the issue is, you know, public works committee, like you mentioned, if it was infrastructure related, or you know, public safety is another option, and depending if it's a safety issue. So we'll see, depending on the issues that we're addressing, who we report to, but it would always be that city council, one of their committees, most likely.
All right.
All right.
Anything else? Anyone else?
All right, well, take care, everybody. We'll see you in January. The next date is January 13th, 9 a.m. So in the meantime, I will prepare the minutes and send those out for your review. And then I know John had requested the presentation slides, so I'll send those out. And then Keith and Sharon, I will work with you on kind of going through the feedback that we received today and coming up with a kind of the framework for a work program for us.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everybody.